Okay, so talk about social skills a lot, and I talk about social skills across all of the conditions and a lot of my talks. But this is the first time I've really tried to give a talk just focused on social skills across the conditions. It's a little bit tricky because I know there's differences across the conditions based on lots of different things. But let's just think about social skills as coming from, sorry, this is a very sensitive microphone, as having multiple components, all that are interrelated and all have impact on one another, right? Makes sense? This is the way we think about it in the Extraordinary Kids Clinic in terms of all the different areas that impact lots of development, but particularly social skill development. So these are some just brief descriptions of what we see manifested in the different conditions. A lot of that will look familiar to you, right? Yep. But check, right? Yes. But this is, I think, a representation of really more how they interact with one another. And we need to think carefully about how they interact with each other, and that's part of the reason why we think good, comprehensive, multidisciplinary evaluations is very helpful, because I can talk with the PT about how motor delays are interfering with social skills, and the PT can talk to me about executive functioning. So it's important to think about that. Okay, a story. This is Ben. I got a release before I used his picture. He has XXY. When his family came to us, they said he was their easiest kid when he was younger. And he's obviously handsome and kind and sensitive. And he has a few close friends. They are younger than Ben. His favorite thing to do is to play with Matchbox cars, stuffed animals. He loves playing Minecraft, right? Minecraft didn't pay me to say that. And he's actually very good at it. Oops, sorry, I'm going to go back. But afternoons are challenging, and he comes home from school tired, takes a nap, and then has too little energy to do homework. This has become a big issue for the family. He is easy to cry at this point and has most recently been having meltdowns with just minor triggers. He doesn't seem embarrassed by these meltdowns, and he prefers to play by himself or with a small group of kids. He whines more than the family would expect. They're really struggling with this. He tends to take a lot more time to get ready, often doesn't follow through. His family worries that he doesn't pay attention. He seems lost in his own world. And while he loves to help out, he takes a long time to do his chores. All of his peers play team sports, and he wants very much to be on a team and asks his parents all the time to include him on a team. But he really isn't all that interested in the actual sport. And he would much prefer to either be on screen time or riding his bike and fishing. How old is Ben?
16. I'm not kidding.
You're right, about 8 or 9 seems about right. Yeah. Ben is 11 years old. Right. So, and he could be 16. And it's only because I had a picture up there that kind of gives him away a little bit. But I think this is one of the things that families deal with a lot, is they struggle with social skills that don't seem consistent with their kid's age. So what I want to go through very quickly is, what do we expect? This is a question that is asked of us all the time in clinic. What do we expect at different ages in terms of social skills? I'm involved in the Extraordinary Kids Clinic baby study, and so I see kids literally every week from 6 months and up. So I'm seeing little babies every week with conditions, with X and Y conditions. So I want to really emphasize something here. Most babies is going to be on the left, or most kids on the left, and XY on the right. And initially I wrote these slides to say maybe and not for every kid, but I took that out because it kind of got redundant. But I really want to emphasize Some of the XY things I call out are maybes, and oftentimes kids are just like other kids. So to that point, maybe and often just like. So I don't want to overemphasize that point. Oh, so on this slide. So this is very common. We see kids come in that families say they're easy babies, they're quiet, they're sweet-natured. They might be a little more easily overwhelmed than other babies, but otherwise they are the easy babies. And generally speaking, we would expect that of typically developing babies. A little bit of the difference is this strikingly easy baby presentation. And then at 3 to 6 months, that easy baby phenomena kind of continues. But we're seeing, and this is, we are waiting to publish this data, but one of the profiles we think we're seeing is that kids are a little socially less vocal than we would expect. They're watchers, not talkers. They're easily entertained by games, but not necessarily as interested in peekaboo for the game aspect of it as they are for just watching you be silly, which is cool and fun. And then as we get into the 6 to 9 month age range, one of the things we see that's a little different socially, at least, again, sometimes, is our babies are quieter, particularly with new people. They are making fewer vowel sounds, and there's less variation in vocalization. I want to also emphasize we haven't published this data yet, but I really think it's important for families to have an understanding of these things as we are beginning to, this is our clinical experience. Then at 9 to 12 months, and this is, what's important about this is I think up to this point many families feel like, wow, I got lucky, I have such an easy baby, things are going so well. And I don't, particularly for the families who have a prenatal diagnosis, I think there's some kind of reassurance up to about the 9 to 12 month range, because you feel like, you know what, everything seems so cool. And cool kid, and they are really cool kids. I'm really fortunate to get to work with them. What? I'm gonna have to what? Yeah, that's just about when you start, right, that's right. Because it was so easy, right? That's right. Whereas your other kids are like, I don't know if I'm ever going to do this again. Right. So while most babies are starting to talk in this range, these are their first words, they're expressing separation anxiety, and they're using gestures to express themselves. For babies with X and Y conditions, sometimes anyway, we're seeing a little less imitation of speech sounds, more expressing of distress when separated than we would expect. And they may not be using consonants in those first words yet. There's just a little bit of a lag there. And they may be a little bit more cautious than we expect. In the 1 to 2 year range, we are expecting language and motor to be exploding during this time, and sometimes we're seeing them lag a little bit in terms of both motor and verbal skills. They really maintain that sweet temperament. At least in my experience, it's really striking. Although a lot of families are beginning to tell us that this is when they begin to see tantrums. And this is about the first time a lot of families say the social skills seem immature. They seem to be functioning like a younger kid socially. Whereas more typical babies are really, they're becoming tough. They're letting you know it when you don't do what you want them to do. And they're telling you about it. In this range, I think the concerns are more likely to begin to be presented to a professional. We see more expression when frustration, and what I think is beginning to happen in this phase is those motor and language delays are beginning to be a discrepancy from what the kid wants to do and their ideas of what they want to do. So they get frustrated and they start expressing it, and that's when we start really seeing kind of this onset of temper tantrums. These are typically the ages when early intervention becomes very pertinent, and we would want to encourage families to consider whether or not early intervention would be worthwhile. 3 to 4 years old, okay, now kids are really getting interested in other kids. And by the way, everything on the left are the CDC descriptions of what is expected for these age ranges. This is when kids are they're interested in group play, they're doing imitation of other kids, they're beginning to express themselves with 3-word phrases that are meaningful and socially communicative. I want to go, I want you to stay, I want you to play with me, things like that. Whereas in the X and Y conditions, we may see a little bit more cautiousness, a little more, sometimes this is when the fatigue begins to really show for our young children, where they really can't tolerate playing after preschool. They're just too tired. And speech delays begin interfering with their play with other kids. Also, the motor delays start to interfere, because this is when, in this day and age, right, kids are going to pee-wee soccer and running around, and they're doing BMX biking and all kinds of amazing stuff. And if you have a son or a daughter who has speech delays, you'll be noticing that this is the time you start to see a little bit of lag. And quite honestly, sometimes anyway, this is where kids are learning social skills, is these gross motor play groups. This is when they're going to go run around and figure out, no, wait, you're better than I am, but I'm better at you than this. But it's tough when you have motor delays to engage in those settings. In the school age phase, this is for most kids, this is when they're really turning to peers for companionship. This is the classic stage that kids begin relying on friends for guiding them, for teaching them what's right and wrong, as much as I, as a parent, want to believe I was more important than their friends. This is actually very true, and the research bears out that school-age kids are beginning to rely on their peers for guidance. They usually have developed a best friend in this age, in this stage, and they have a group of friends. Small or large, it could vary, but and they're beginning to really develop pretty sophisticated understanding of feeling states, what feelings could lead to other feelings, and they're beginning to develop an identity, what they're good at, what they're not good at. And this is the age range that other children start to notice the differences. Other children start saying, start saying things that are sometimes mean, like you can't run as fast as I. Yeah, what's wrong with you? Why are you different, right? What was it? What kind of accent is that? Right, and so that's a good point, Rob. The speech articulation differences may emerge at this time. The motor differences may emerge at this time. And you, as parents, are beginning to deal with worry about bullying. You're worrying about schools not sufficiently supporting kids. And I think, as a psychologist, you're particularly concerned about schools appropriately supporting their social deficits, because they're mild oftentimes, and the schools don't get that these mild social differences are very impairing in those group projects, are very impairing in cooperative learning and giving presentations together, and it's a real concern. Then in the school-aged kid with XY, you see these issues really come up as a problem. They prefer socializing with family rather than with kids at school. They're becoming more loners. Their visual spatial skills are oftentimes really emerging in this time. But what school thinks that drawing a cool picture should get you the top grade on your spelling test? They don't, right? Schools don't tend to value their visual spatial skills as much as what would help kids. What?
Putting together furniture and putting together stuff.
Yeah. Right. So one of the things I'm oftentimes recommending in this age group is giving kids a way to demonstrate their abilities and their social ability in nonverbal ways. Drawing together, building things together, cooking together, things like that. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Fatigue becomes more, I've been talking about fatigue all day long in all of the sessions, but fatigue really impacts social skills. When is the single time that kids in the school age range are getting together? After school. When are our kids at their height of fatigue issues? After school. Right. Right. That's when, and then you combine that with all their friends are doing motor sports of some kind, and it's just a bad fit. It really is a bad fit. And it's not like hockey or swimming helps you out, because those things happen early in the morning, right? And so it's very difficult to find a good fit of a social activity that doesn't hit the fatigue sweet spot, if you will. Teens. Oh, don't we love the teens? So you guys all know, typical teens are beginning to rely largely on their peer group now. We become incredibly stupid. We lose tons of IQ points. It's really a phenomena, right? Parents become stupid when their kids are teenagers. But it's a good thing we're stupid. It really is. Because if we were smarter, they wouldn't decide they don't need us. They would never leave home if we were the best thing since sliced bread. So this is the phase when they really begin to develop their own identity. They should be developing their own identity. They're becoming moody. They're beginning to figure out their mood states in relatively sophisticated ways. And they're developing life goals and life skills, either academically or vocationally. Our X and Y teens are the ones that probably demonstrate the broadest variability and some of the most concerns. They're sensitive. They oftentimes have unique abilities that may not be fully recognized. Their behavioral expression of moods is notable at this time, and it's seen as immature. They're having tantrums. They're exhibiting behaviors rather than talking about them. And this is when the peers notice the physical differences. Even in the girls, they're beginning to notice they're taller. And certainly for the boys, they're noticing the physical differences, and it's being discussed in the boys with multiple X's. And this is when the social immaturity really becomes more pronounced, and that I see clinically almost across the board. It's rare I see a teenager with a condition who doesn't have immature social skills. Inattention becomes an issue, and folks, screen time, big issue. This is when it really takes off, and this is when, in the school age, late school age, and teen years, is when screen time becomes most concerning for either overuse of screen time to the exclusion of social interactions. We have some young men here. You guys like screen time? No? No? Good. All right. I have my phone right here with Scrabble on it. But I think we all like screen time. The problem is with teens, it becomes really heavy use. And it replaces socialization. And a lot of kids will say, I am socializing. I have friends on my game. And oftentimes we see much more of a loner kind of profile. So let me stop. That basic overview of kind of what we would expect socially, it's pretty quick. Does that make sense both from a typical standard and from an XY standard? Did I miss anything big? Kind of a basic overview? Okay. Okay, so let's break down social skills a little bit more. We hypothesize that social interactions work starting with an interest, and then it's supported by language, right? Something like, do you want to build this with me? Do you want to play with me? You want to do something? We use language, and even for people who are nonverbal, they'll use gestures to say, hey, you want to do something with me? So it's another form of communication. And then nonverbal skills come in to support that activity, whatever it is. How do we play together? How far do we stand from each other? What do we do together? And then emotional awareness works to support that interaction. Oh, you look happy that we're doing this together. I think I'll keep doing this. Oh, that didn't work for you. I can see that you don't want to do what we're doing. So I'm going to change up the play a little bit. And then The social cognition further supports interaction. Social cognition is that idea of being able to use your theory of mind to understand what someone else wants in this interaction. And we use this all the time. We're reading social cues to try to figure out, from a social cognition perspective, how to further this interaction. And so for me, standing up here with all of you out here in the audience, and I can barely see your faces, I'm still trying to gather social cognitive input for what I'm saying to get a sense of, is this making sense? Thank you. Right? That's social cognition. And so these all work together to help solve problems in the social interaction domain. Okay? So it's just a very basic kind of breakdown of a single social interaction. The problem is, our kids have problems with verbal language. They have problems with social cognition. You know where I'm going with this. They have problems with emotional awareness. And their executive functioning can really affect problem solving. So, wow, what do we have left? We have interest, and that we have. I can tell you that if there's anything we have in this entire group, it's social motivation. You see it out there in the hallway. Dr. Wilson, so good to see you. Dr. Tartaglia, we get hugs, they talk to us, it's awesome. And when I go to autism conferences with kids really impaired by autism, they're not as socially motivated. So we have the interest. And we clearly have some good nonverbal language and ability to read cues. The problem is we have a lot of other dysfunction, a lot of different areas that interfere with social skills. So far makes sense? Social cognition plugging in here for a second, yeah? Okay. So what can help? I'm just going to give a couple of really simple analogies. If you've got delayed speech, then let's support them with their nonverbal strengths. Like I said, instead of a discussion about what we're going to do, let's go do something, let's cook together, let's build something together, let's go on a walk, let's build a tree house, let's do something. And then keep it short and move on. Don't try to have these lengthy interactions because they oftentimes go poorly once there's more language, problem solving, and negotiation that needs to happen. Same thing for delayed motor skills. Try less gross motor related approaches to get kids to interact without having to rely on those gross motor skills, if that's your person's area of weakness. I don't mean to draw vast conclusions because it's not always the case. We have boys that are good swimmers, good basketball players, girls that are good swimmers. And so it's not necessarily no motor activity. Yes? Right. I think it's just thinking. So the comment was, we want to, if we're doing these after-school activities, does that make it worse? Am I right?
Well, exertion.
Exertion. Right. And so it's just kind of finding that sweet spot of an activity that's the kind of the right balance. This is an idea of the social trajectory. So if you look at this top arrow, that's kind of that's the social trajectory. Starts with parallel play, goes on to reciprocal play, going back and forth, trading, and then sustained interactive play, which is dependent on those reciprocal play skills. And this is the case for adults too. So we need to have a reciprocal conversation. Hi, how are you? How's the weather? That kind of thing. And then we would build that into a more truly interactive conversation where we would build on that. And that's what underlies friendships. When we have a trajectory that is a more modest social skill trajectory with parallel play that doesn't really lead to reciprocal play and is more limited social play, and then to one-sided interests, and then we have a kid that kind of ends up being more of a loner. There's a discrepancy between kind of the typical trajectory and the trajectory that we think we see a little bit more commonly in X and Y variations. And it's really an area of research. A lot of us are looking at it, trying to understand it, trying to understand what leads to these. I think I represented that it's multifactorial. And when there's a gap over there, the discrepancy between the trajectory you would expect and the trajectory you see, it might lead to some social cautiousness. Not sure that I really want to do things, or socially awkward, or it may actually lead to enough of a discrepancy that it's consistent with autism spectrum disorder. So when social expectations and social skills are at a different trajectory, that can lead to a significant gap that may be very significant and require specific supports. Top 10 what helps. These are the things I've come up with. These are the things I oftentimes feel like I'm telling families. Build on strengths, always build on strengths. That's what we should always be doing with the people we love. And try to match, so start with where their social skills are and go from there. So instead of coming in and saying, I would expect a full conversation, why aren't you talking to me? Come on, talk to me. And just kind of pestering them with questions, let's start with your person where they are. And then the whole idea of scaffolding, you guys familiar with this concept of scaffolding? It's a little different than support. Scaffolding is helping, like you imagine a scaffold, it's not a building. It doesn't have bricks and mortars and walls, but it's enough to say, okay, I'm kind of helping you out here, but I can take down that scaffolding when I don't need it any longer. Then another important point is give it time. Be patient. Allow the social, I mean over time and in the moment. How many have had the experience of saying, okay, we're gonna get ready, let's go. How's that work? Doesn't work, right? The whole timing thing is really different. So it's much better to know that it's going to take more time to get ready in the morning, know that it's going to take more time to do homework, and give them more time, but also schedule it. So you have a sense of, we're going to work for short periods, we're going to have breaks for short periods, we're going to use timers, we're going to use schedules, we're going to use your phone if you're working with somebody who has a phone to show them what's expected, not telling them. Telling kids what to do, like, I need you to get your backpack, and I need you to get your shoes, and I need you to get, oh, don't forget your textbook, and did you brush your teeth? And by the way, you're going to need your jacket today, and you guys just spaced out on me. Why wouldn't our person space out on me, right? Then it's really important to reduce language. Yeah?
So would showing them what to do be in like a list form, or like as in teaching them?
Yeah.
Like how do you do it? What are you saying?
Right. So we talked in, I think, Trisomy X about this. It can be very, very helpful. On my phone, do I have a list of words of things that I need to do? No, I have icons. And they help you understand, what do I have, where do I need to go if I wanted to look at my schedule, if I wanted to look at my phone book. I have icons. It can be very helpful to use pictures, just simple pictures. Here's what we need to do. You don't want to be disrespectful, depending on the age of your person, but you can certainly just do a list of using icons, and there are some great online apps that use that. Yes?
We've used our son's platform, but we've used, when she walks out the door, just the top 5 things that
Yeah.
don't forget to do this, and it ends with kissing mom.
So the suggestion is right outside his son's door, they have a list of top 5 things that need to happen. And are those pictures or written?
They're pictures.
Pictures. And I think that works even for people who can read, and works well for me, honestly. Show me pictures of what I need to do, I can very quickly figure it out. So reducing language demands as much as possible. Yes, there's a question. I thought I'd get through this, and then we have a question. Just so I see the question. My 17-year-old XXY has problems with impulsivity. I was wondering what type of professional can help him learn to control his impulses. Get to that in just a second. The other thing, number 6 up here, provide tools, by which I mean give them some things that you know will work in whatever setting they're going into. A set of 5 things to ask people, a set of things to tell people about yourself, a set of things that just works. And you just do a little bit of a quick preamble. Okay, we're going to go to the rec center, we're going to go swimming. You might want to ask, well, I know Joe's going to be there. You might want to ask Joe if he'd like an ice cream cone. I brought a cooler with probably not ice cream cones, but bring some things to help support that. Does that make sense? And then don't allow screen time to replace social time. All people these days is spending some time on the screen. Really be thoughtful about if your son or daughter is going on the screen at a time that he or she really could be out socializing. Keep it short, keep it successful, and then you can do screen time as a way to kind of unplug. Although I strongly recommend monitoring screen time. And then keep social interactions short. And a few good friends is better than a whole bunch of friends. A few good friends is a good thing. And then model social coping skills yourself and narrate it. So when you run into a social problem at the grocery store, somewhere, say, that person really frustrated me. Tell your son or daughter what you were feeling. And this is how I dealt with it. Just to give a quick example of this is what you would do. And then, if you can, say, what would you have done? It's a great way to have little kind of thought experiments with your son or daughter and practice some of these skills. So when they, say something like, would have hauled off and hit her, you say, oh yeah, that would be one option. Let's think that through. What would have happened? And it really can help them kind of experiment with it. In terms of how to help with impulses, it really depends on what is causing the impulses. And as I talked about earlier, there can be a lot of things that contribute to impulsive behavior. Sometimes it's attention, sometimes it's anxiety, sometimes it's not knowing what to do, and so it's kind of defined as someone being impulsive, when in fact they really just didn't know what to do, and this is the one thing they knew how to do, so they did it. So generally speaking, if the case is really a profile of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, we certainly start with primary care physician and raise that concern, see if there's some ways to help with that. The 2 standard ways is to do a combination of behavioral intervention and medication. But if the impulse control is related to a social deficit issue, I'd want to make sure that we have that identified. Impulses are such a huge area. It's hard to just say one professional is going to help with it, and it depends on the age of your son. And you said 17. That's right, you said 17. The range of people that might be helpful are psychologists, psychiatrists, occupational therapists, learning support, learning tutors, because oftentimes the impulsivity is in a school setting. So I think that's the general kind, those are the areas I would be thinking about. So I want to take a few questions. I heard that there were some folks that wanted to ask questions, so let me repeat your questions so that other people can hear it. No questions? Seriously? We're done?
Is this your last slide?
Yeah. Oh.
Okay, so.
I have lots that I can say about social skills, but I thought I really wanted to make sure I left enough time for questions because I oftentimes don't. Yes?
Big problem we're having, we have 4 children. Our son is the last one.
4 children, your son's last one.
Range from
23 to 11.
How do I know when most of the stuff either expired date, just being an 11-year-old or more? Crap.
Right. How do you know? That's right. And I'm trying to figure out why we care.
We don't. And I'm trying not to use one as an excuse for the other.
Yeah, yeah.
But I hope I'm not doing more harm than good by
Right.
not giving him a push.
Right. So what we generally recommend for that whole thing is start with what you know your son is capable of. And like all of our children, we start with what they're capable of and then expect a little bit more through teaching and support. Whether or not it's the chromosomes or something else, just their age. And that's part of the reason why I kind of put some basic guidelines up there. If kids are way off from their typical peers, I really want to understand that. I'm a psychologist, that's what I do. But I want to understand what's underlying that so I can appropriately support it. And then the other mantra I think we should all have with our kids is everybody's different. Everybody needs different things. It doesn't matter whether you have a condition or not. Everyone needs slightly different things.
There's no right or wrong.
I think there's no right, maybe. But there's no right or wrong. Vastly there's some right or wrong. But generally speaking, good parenting is good parenting. Yeah, yeah. And you're one because you're here this weekend.
When I grew up, screen time was not an issue.
Yeah,
There were no screens,
yeah.
other than movie screens. I see my grandchildren who don't have problems using screen time a lot.
Yeah.
What strategies do families employ most successfully with the least friction?
So the question is, what strategies do families employ with the least amount of friction? And I'm guessing it's not only friction between the adult and the child, but between the adults that have different perspectives. Okay, here's the basics. There are very good, well-reasoned guidelines for screen time, and they are, American Academy of Pediatrics provides them. They're very good and very reasonable. There's another guideline, and that was developed by the Major Motion Picture Company. You know what that guideline is? A commercial is 3 minutes. That's a short break. Entertainment, just for the purposes of, like I want to unplug, that's 30 minutes. It's called a TV show. A little more entertainment, when you really have a little bit more time, that's an hour TV show. 3 hours of TV shows a day? No, that's excessive. And really, they've designed our viewing audience around not 3 hours of TV shows. It's usually either half an hour or 1 hour. A movie, 2 hours, 3 hours, that's a once a week, maybe once a month kind of thing, right? 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy, Star Wars, one ring to rule them all. That is an exceptional viewing experience. So when we are way out of alignment, when we have kids on screen time 4 and 5 hours a day, think of that as if us in the older generation was watching a 4-hour movie every single day.
So are you including them screen time, not just television watching? It's actually, my kids don't even watch TV, but they watch
Right.
other people watch.
They watch other people play. Yeah, right. So, okay, I'm kind of being a nerd up here because anybody who actually has a kid who does screen time goes, oh, she's way out of what is typical, because this whole area has really moved forward very quickly with group gaming, with audience gaming where you're watching somebody else play, and so it's really becoming much more complex very quickly. The problem is, here's my perspective. If I have good visual motor skills, or good visual skills, good visual spatial skills, and I have poor language, relatively poor motor skills, I'd prefer to be a loner, and I'd really like not so much attention on me. What's the perfect fit? Screen time. It's perfect. It's a perfect fit. For typically developing kids, they'll get restless with it, and they'll want to go out and they want to do something else. and they want to go see their live friends. But for our kids, I think it's really a unique fit between their strengths and their weaknesses. So generally speaking, the recommendations I would make is to keep screen time under 2 hours a day. It's a standard recommendation, and really, depending on the age, under 2 hours even a week. And little kids should be less, obviously far less than that. And then replace screen time with social time, so that it's first social time, just a second, first social skill time, and then screen time.
So to follow that up then, and you may not have this answer, but parents may, but what are those alternatives that we find with our group? Kids?
Well,
Because like playing basketball doesn't naturally come that
right, and it's going to range. I mean,
Well, that's, you
yeah.
have ideas, I guess.
Yeah, there's lots of ideas. So what I found is very helpful are things like, fishing, martial arts, bike riding, swimming, going for what golf? Golfing. What?
Okay, good, yeah, keep them coming. How many have a child? 13.
Yeah.
How do you feel about social skills groups?
Okay, social skills groups.
So for XYZ,
Broadly speaking, yes,
on with the
yes.
diagnosis, but he doesn't really fit in with the group.
Right. Social skills groups, broadly speaking, are a great idea, but it really depends on the quality of the social skills groups. There are good evidence-based manualized programs. Some of them I'll mention are Unstuck and on Target, Facing Your Fears, Social Flex.
Are those computer-based?
No, those are live. Those are, yeah, facility. Oh, so you're talking about social skills on games, like Bishop's social skills?
You gave a name, so I didn't know if it was.
No, that's a,
program or.
no, it's an evidence-based therapy that's out there in the community. Most of the evidence shows that social skills groups that are in your schools are really the most useful and show long-term effective results, because they're practicing skills with kids that they know every day and with people who know them. Oftentimes the community social skills groups are a little harder to make that generalization, because while you may have made a friend in the social skills group at your local clinic, you don't have that same friend at school to keep seeing. But nonetheless, they're oftentimes very, very helpful. And at Children's Hospital Colorado, we have combination groups that are led by occupational therapists and speech therapists, or occupational therapists and psychologists. And those can be very effective, because occupational therapists really have a unique skill set for our kids. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any kind of study or ideas around, like, especially for the trisomy girls and social media and how.
Social media.
They want to share so much.
Yeah. So the question is about social media and trisomy girls, but I think more broadly all the conditions really. Social media is tricky. So I actually have seen some improvement in this area as we've moved away from Facebook and more towards Instagram, because it's visual and it's not as much people writing snarky comments about each other, but you have to monitor, obviously what they're taking pictures of. But I think what can be uniquely helpful for our kids are nonverbal formats to keep their friendships sustained. I think I would just, generally speaking, recommend careful surveillance and longer than you would expect. Usually the biggest protective thing we can teach our kids is judgment, right? And so not just hovering, but teaching judgment. So that instead of when you see something inappropriate on your kid's social media account, rather than, wow, what are they talking about here? Say, let's talk about this together. Same thing with screen time, by the way. If your kid is into screen time, do it with them. Ask them questions. Have them show you. Make it social. They won't notice. And it's a great opportunity to take turns. Hey, can I try? Oh, this is what I do when I'm frustrated. Yeah.
Yes, my son plays Minecraft.
Minecraft.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we don't do any violent games or anything. So I got a account with Minecraft, and I play with him. It's fun.
Yep.
And so we build things together.
Yep.
Mine likes to build, and I mine the stuff, and he mold and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, Minecraft can be actually very helpful. It's the multiplayer approach to Minecraft where people are on headphones that I get concerned about. So if your kid is doing any kind of multiplayer anything, or the equivalent, it needs to be on speaker so that you hear it or they don't get to play it. And you need to know who they are. And in fact, I work with a patient who has a suggestion for AXYS, Robbie. That is, he wants a Minecraft festival during AXYS. Yeah.
Even just an access server.
Or on the AXYS server. No, I think actually Minecraft is interesting. I'd actually like to do some research around it because it is specifically a visual spatial task that can be social, and you can build on it, and it is generally speaking benign unless what they're saying over the speakers are a concern.
So with some of the activities, like at what age
4 minutes.
can we pull them back from, like my 13-year-old is still playing Matchbox cars. Is that still appropriate to encourage?
Okay, that's a good question. So the question is, at what point do you redirect kind of immature play? My friend Ben was a good example of it. He loved Matchbox cars and stuffed animals. The reason I knew he liked stuffed animals is he carried them with him everywhere he went at Children's Hospital, Colorado. Here's my take on that, and that is everybody has things they like. And I think it's important for us to have things we like. I really do. I think it's also important for us to understand there's a time and place for everything, and you can use that terminology, time and place for Matchbox, time and place for stuffed animals, and come up with a way that you can support that. So I have a family whose kid really, really likes Matchbox. He also just likes cars, and he's 17 years old. And he carries kind of the nice model cars with him, you know, in his pocket. That's right. That's right. And they're cool. I mean, he really can share them with adults, and the door's open, and it's real cool. Yes? I have 3 minutes remaining, they tell me.
That reminds me of something that we've noticed with our son, and I wonder if you have any advice for us. He complains a lot, right? So
Complains.
If he has, like, mosquito bites, he'll tell us about all the time. He's scratching his knee, golden crown for days.
Yeah.
So how do
I have a mosquito bite.
I know, is there a good way to have sort of recognize
That's immature? Yeah. As with all immature behavior, I think we start with what it is that they want, which is attention or appropriate attention. Oh, I'm sure that mosquito bite's a problem for you. Sorry to hear that. Try to redirect. We're done talking about it. And then point out that is it helpful to talk about the mosquito bite? Is it helpful? So I do that, kind of, you see I'm doing kind of a stair-step ways, and then I say, you know what, we're done talking about some mosquito bites. Thanks, we're gonna move on to talking about something else. And you can be very direct, because that subtle cue of, I don't really want to talk about, and sometimes it's really inappropriate what they want to talk about. So you have to sometimes be very concrete. We're done talking about mosquito bites, or constipation, or whatever it is. And worse, I'm just aware that I'm being, yes.
I have a son who's 15,
Uh-huh.
just entering the world of starting on androgen therapy possibly.
Uh-huh.
What is your take on how androgen therapy improves or negatively affects, i.e. aggressiveness?
Okay. She's asking about the impact of testosterone or androgen therapy and social skills and aggressiveness. And I have 1 minute remaining at a conference. I mean, right? So here's the thing. I have the unique privilege to work on an interdisciplinary team with an endocrinologist that really, we work together and talk about the overall picture and take care of the whole child, and nothing is done kind of in sole isolation. I talked a little bit earlier today in the XXYY and XXXY breakout about typically adolescence happens and puberty happens in line with all these other skills. You become more able to talk about your feelings, you become, all of those things grow together. And sometimes we need to, for medical reasons, support puberty when we don't have kind of the underlying social and mood modulation that usually goes with puberty. So I think it's an important thing to consider, just in terms of timing. Now, what your real question was is, do I think androgen therapy improves social skills? We need a lot more research, and it needs to be evidence-based and double-blinded, and we need to be careful about it.
Can you talk to your experience up to this point? And I know it's not research-based or scientific.
It's very complex, really. I think it's, there's so many different factors. It is not a miracle drug. There is no question. And I wondered if I would notice some kind of miracle, because I work all the time with kids that are just starting androgen therapy. Not a miracle drug. It turns out it wasn't a miracle drug for typically functioning boys to go through puberty either. Right? Yes? Yeah.
Testosterone, they don't know if it does this. When testosterone was approved, what was it originally approved for?
What was testosterone originally approved for in this population?
Just in general, as an approved FDA.
Yeah, so I'm going to let you ask endocrinology that.
Okay.
I think oh wow, pushing me right out of my scope, right here at the end too. I think that's best to ask some of the endocrinologists and urologists that are here. Okay, you guys, thank you for your courage. Thank you for being here.